Text 16 is on the board. Pramanam andakoshasya bhaya beyantara bedataha mahatam chanucharitam varnashrama vinischaya pramanam andakoshasya bhaya beyantara bedataha mahatam chanucharitam varnashrama vinischaya pramanamandakosasya bhaya beyantara bedataha mahatam chanucharitam varnashrama vinischaya Word for word translation. Pramanam, extent and measurement. Andakoshasya, of the universe. Bhaya, outer space. Abhyantara, inner space. Bhedata, by division of. Mahatam, of the great souls. Cha, also. Anucharitam, character and activities. Varna, castes. Ashrama, orders of life. Vinischaya, specifically described. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. Also, please describe the inner and outer space of the universe by specific divisions, as well as the character and activities of the great souls, and also the characteristics of the different classifications of the castes and orders of social life. Maharaj Parikshit is a typical devotee of Lord Krishna, and as such, he is anxious to know the complete significance of the creation of the Lord. He wants to know the inner and outer space of the universal form. It is quite fitting for the real searcher of knowledge to know all about this. Those who are of the opinion that the devotees of the Lord are satisfied with mere sentiments can find in the inquiries of Maharaj Parikshit good lessons as to how inquisitive a pure devotee is to know things in their true perfection. The modern scientist is unable to know about the inner space of the universal horizon, and what to speak of the space which covers the universe. Maharaj Parikshit is not satisfied with only material knowledge. He is inquisitive about the character and activities of the great souls, the devotees of the Lord. The glories of the Lord and the glories of His devotees combined together comprise the complete knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Krishna showed His mother the complete universal creation within His mouth, while she, completely charmed by her son, wanted to look inside the mouth of the Lord just to see how much earth the child had eaten. By the grace of the Lord, the devotees are able to see everything in the universe within the mouth of the Lord. The very idea of the scientific division of four castes of human society and 4 orders of life is also inquired about herewith on the basis of individual, personal quality. The 4 divisions are exactly like the 4 divisions of one's personal body. The parts and parcels of the body are non-different from the body, but by themselves they are only parts. That is the significance of the whole scientific system of 4 castes and 4 social orders. The value of such scientific division of human society can be ascertained only in terms of the proportionate development of devotional service to the Lord. Any person employed in governmental service, including the president, is a part and parcel of the entire government. Everyone is a government servant, but no one is the government himself. That is the position of all living entities in the government of the Supreme Lord. No one can artificially claim the supreme position of the Lord, but everyone is meant to serve the purpose of the Supreme Whole. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagunata Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Shude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhuba Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for attending Srimad Bhagavatam class. Those here and on Mayapur TV. I'll read the translation again. Also, please describe the inner and outer space of the universe by specific divisions, as well as the character and activities of the great souls, and also the characteristics of the different classifications of the castes and orders of social life. So in this section, or this chapter is titled Questions by King Parikshit. And as I was reading through them, obviously over the past week, devotees have been beautifully speaking on the qualities of King Parikshit and how he's... one quality of a devotee is that he's always, he or she is always inquisitive, just eager to hear about the Lord, or eager to glorify and eager to hear about the Lord. I think 2 days ago, Ganesham Prabhu gave class and he said how we should develop those qualities of, and the example that he gave was of a chataka bird who's just eagerly waiting for the drop of rain to come from the cloud and just to extract that. So similarly, we should be eager to extract the nectar that's found in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam and also through various devotees who are relishing that nectar. So here in this section, or in this chapter, Parikshit Maharaj, through his own inquiry, is establishing the philosophical basis of Srimad Bhagavatam. It echoes a similar mood of Arjuna, or what Krishna is presenting to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 34. Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadagdante jnanam jnanam tattvadarshinaha. Just try to approach the truth by approaching, learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. So, here Parikshit Maharaj is requesting Sukadev Goswami to please enlighten me on these topics. And there's questions that we see here. These are questions that one requires that Divyagyan, that intelligence to ask. Spiritual Master, in the various purports preceding this, Srila Prabhupada writes that Parikshit wants to know everything. He's eager to know about everything. So he's requesting Sukadev Goswami, please speak on those topics, or please enlighten me on those topics even I may not be aware of. So even in our situation, we may have some questions, and we may not think of certain questions, but the spiritual master, through Krishna, through the agency of the spiritual master, will give us that intelligence to ask the right questions. In fact, just last week, I happened to meet a young boy who had come to the temple. And I asked him, he had been reading Prabhupada's books for the past year, and he had read the Bhagavad Gita twice. And I asked him what book did he first read? What first inspired him on this path? And he said, the first book I ever read was Perfect Questions and Perfect Answers. It's a conversation between Prabhupada and His Great Brahma Tirtha Prabhu. And such wonderful questions. And Prabhupada is answering them and dispelling the doubts that have been placed, that are in the heart and that are in the mind of Brahma Tirtha Prabhu, but also Brahma Tirtha Prabhu represents all of us in one sense. So I really, really highly recommend. That book helped me a great deal. And as I could see, the potency of Srila Prabhupada speaking strongly and how it inspired and influenced this young man whom we met last week. Similarly, we find, so Parikshit Maharaj wants to know everything. As he's saying, he is keen on knowing the inner and outer dimensions of the universe, as well as the character of the great souls and of Varnashram. So, this month of Purushottam, we read or we chant, we recite the prayers offered by Brahma to Krishna as concluding towards the Brahma Vimoha Leela. And in that Canto 10, Chapter 14, verse 56, in that verse, in that purport, disciples of Prabhupada echo. So Brahma is saying that everything, he's presenting to us the vision of the Mahabhagavat. How Mahabhagavat, who is, in this case, in this verse and purport is Parikshit Maharaj, sees Krishna as the active principle in all movable and immovable living entities. And in that purport it's described that everything exists within Krishna and Krishna exists within everything. But the order of progression is from the energetic to energy. Even though Krishna is the origin of all identities, He is the original identity. All identities emanate from Him. And even though He is the supreme energetic, all dimensions and all space and dimensions of energy come from Him. So, and it goes on to say there's a passage in that purport which describes how Srila Prabhupada in his Krishna book writes that in this world, without being an expansion of Krishna, nothing is attractive. In fact, he says that Krishna is the active principle in everything. So how we should train ourselves to see Krishna in everything. And that again is the vision of the Mahabhagavat. And we may say, oh, we're not at that level yet, but Parikshit Maharaj is asking us to elevate our consciousness to that state of mind where he's displaying that consciousness by his own example. And famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 30. I can't remember the Sanskrit on the top of my head. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sa cha me na pranashyati. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I'm never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So, how we should, again, train our mind, because our mind, as it is said in chapter 6, for one who's not conquered his mind, the mind can be the worst, his enemy. But one who's trained his mind, the mind is his friend. Actually, I'll read the exact word because I'm chapter 6 right here. Very famous verse. Bandhuratma atmatmanastasya yenatmai vatma maivatmana jitaha anatmanastu satrutve vartet patmaiva satruvat. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends, but for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So what is this principle of always seeing Krishna? That's Prabhupada defines it beautifully as Maranam, absorption in Krishna. And here we are seeing how Parikshit Maharaj is asking about, in one sense, cosmology. Please describe the inner and outer space of the universe, specific divisions. So what is Parikshit Maharaj wanting to see? Actually, Parikshit Maharaj wants to see the familiar in devotional light. He knows everything about the universe. He knows about the planets and how those celestial objects move. But he wants to see how they are all connected to Krishna. Now we need to understand what is the intent of cosmology in Srimad Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam presents us three principles. One is stories of Krishna for us to remember him and to think about him. Stories of different personalities or different special souls who attain Krishna. And the third is to function in this world through matter, which is by presenting some cosmology. Obviously, some of this is presented as the Virat Rupa in second canto, as elements of Sankhya in third canto, and as cosmology itself in the fifth canto. Now we need to understand that Bhagavatam, for example, if we were to read Lilamrita, Prabhupada Lilamrita, and in that it is said Prabhupada would travel through LA, New York, and in the Lilamrita there are descriptions of LA, New York, of the geography of those cities. Let's say LA is very hilly, so on and so forth. It is presenting the context of Prabhupada being in those cities and providing a description of that. It is not a book on US geography. Similarly, Bhagavatam is presenting us the context in which cosmology is actually described. So, again, as devotees, our principle should be to see Krishna in everything. And Arjuna asked this question in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 10:17. O Krishna, how shall I constantly think of you? And Krishna then goes on to explain Bhuti Yoga, the opulence of the Absolute. So now, coming to the point of Smaranam, absorption in Krishna. Who else? I mean, there are so many personalities that are described in the Bhagavatam, but the foremost personality who embodies this principle is Prahlad Maharaj. Always hearing and chanting about Krishna and always remembering Krishna. That's the life of Prahlad Maharaj. And actually, yesterday I was hearing a talk by Her Grace Radha Dasi, a very senior disciple of His Holiness Mukunda Maharaj, and she was describing that how in the Bhagavatam, and I think she had heard Prabhupada, or she had heard a disciple of Prabhupada say that this absorption in Krishna, that how what's described in the Bhagavatam, all that Prahlad Maharaj had to go through, all the trials and tribulations he went through by the torture that were inflicted upon him by his father, they were all just 1 year of Prahlad Maharaj's life. What happened after that is he ruled a kingdom, he went to another planet. That's not described in detail in the Bhagavatam, but what we see is what happened in that 1 year. So the principle is thinking of Krishna in times of crisis. A lot of times that serves to be our biggest challenge. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever state of mind or whatever one thinks at the time of death, that state he'll attain without fail. So how it is of so paramount importance for us to think of Krishna at every moment, because that moment of death can come at any time. And are we prepared? I'm sure some of you may relate to this, but at times when, for those that are students that are studying at colleges, schools, or universities, at times, especially for me, it would happen that I would show up to class on my lecture, and all of a sudden the professor would just say, okay, it's pop quiz, which means that he or she will just have a quiz or a test on the spot. And more than often, I would just be blank. I just wouldn't know what to answer because I didn't prepare for it. So similarly, our situation is like that. We may be, at any moment, our life may come to that moment where we have to leave our body. Are we thinking of Krishna at that moment? So similarly here, Parikshit Maharaj has been given this notice of 7 days, and he's utilizing every moment to just earnestly hear about Krishna, just eager. He's not even disturbed by his hunger or thirst, and that is absorption in Krishna. So similarly, we should tailor our lives such that each moment of our life is taking us closer to Krishna. Obviously, as grihastas, as devotees living in a society, a family, our obligations, it can be challenging. So, just want to speak about this, where Prahlad Maharaj embodies this principle of smaranam. And I was saying how at the time of death, anything can happen, and are we thinking of Krishna? And if we evaluate our own lives, at any particular moment when a sense of urgency came upon us, did we think of Krishna? I'm remembering a pastime that my Guru Maharaj shared in one class. I think it was a Japa retreat. And he was saying how a very senior god brother of his was actually driving. And all of a sudden, his car, he was passing through a railway track. And all of a sudden, his car just stopped at the railway track. He was passing through the railway track. So his car just stopped. And he started chanting very intensely because he noticed that the train was just approaching, was just, a minute away, and he started chanting very intensely. And as he was chanting very intensely, all of a sudden, he asked himself, or a thought came in his mind, oh, what will happen to my wife? Have I signed my will? Luckily, he survived to tell us this pastime, that how he was chanting so intensely, but he was distracted by this very thought. And then he said that he asked himself, oh, I didn't think of Krishna at that moment. So similarly in our day-to-day dealings, in our interactions, and that in so many occasions we hear so many disciples speak highly of Prabhupada in this instant, that whatever circle or whatever conversation Prabhupada entered, even with secular people or people from the outside world, even though the conversation would start from a mundane topic, it would end on Krishna. Prabhupada would be expertly tailor that conversation towards Krishna. For us, it's the opposite. We start talking about Krishna, but then we just end up talking about mundane things. So, As we see this, we understand where we are and what we need to do to come to that platform of always thinking of Krishna. Similarly, here we see Parikshit Maharaj asking about the character and activities of great souls. So, are these great personalities. Now, we need to understand, and I think once last year I was attending a class by His Holiness Bhakti Vidya Purna Swami, and he was saying how when we read about these personalities in the Bhagavatam, we are actually associating with these personalities. These personalities are present, giving us their guidance and giving us their instructions on how to perfect our Krishna consciousness. If we are sincerely eager to associate with these personalities will give us their mercy. And as I was reflecting on Mataji's class yesterday, she was saying that how, from time to time, we get complacent in our own devotional practice. And from time to time, we need that nudge. And we read about these personalities to be inspired in bhakti. What do these personalities do? Right? If I were to tell you, if I were to ask you, okay, you read about Dhruva Maharaj, you read about the pastime of Daksha, what does it actually do? How does it help? Well, she said that these personalities show us the path through which we can overcome our anarthas, our own misgivings. Because treat it this way, Bhagavatam is a book or is a collection of stories of success stories. Personalities who started off from wherever they were and they attained perfection. Through their journey, they are showing us that how Krishna consciousness is relevant for all of us. When we read the story of Prahlad Maharaj, what do we get? We get that age is not a bar for advancing Krishna consciousness. Even someone as young as 5 years old can be a Mahabhagavat, provided that they fully take shelter of the processes of hearing and chanting. Perfection is there. What do we understand through the pastime of Daksha? It's been one of my most favorite pastimes in the Bhagavatam amongst the many. But when I heard this class by Mother Radha Mataji, she was saying the pastime of Daksha in one word is envy. How Daksha was envious of Lord Shiva. And she was saying, and she classified envy in 3 different categories and spoke of the consequences of envy. And she was saying that how if we are envious of someone or we hold something in our heart against some devotee or some person, if we don't work on it, we should be ready to be publicly embarrassed. And that's what happened to Daksha. He was publicly embarrassed. So much so that he got a goat's head. So when we associate with these personalities, we understand the process by which we can overcome anarthas, and we get inspiration from it. We have 2 options. Either we associate with these personalities or we associate with our mind. And as I said earlier, quoting from chapter 6, for one who has not conquered the mind is the worst of the enemies. But one who has done so, the mind is the best of friends. So, our mind is like a monster. And what does our mind fill us up with? It fills up with fear. It's just like being with a little child. Obviously, those that are parents would know this, but when they're putting their little child to bed, a lot of times the child is fearful of going to bed because they're haunted by monsters. Or there's monster under the bed, there's monster in the room, there's something that'll come in. And you have to constantly remind them, no, it's okay. And then you train the child to have that trust in you, the parent. So similarly, we need to have faith in the words of the Shastra. So it's so important for us to associate, read, meditate, associate with these personalities. And as I was reflecting on it, I was remembering there are so many such Mahabhagavats of great personalities that are also amongst us today, or in contemporary society. None other than Srila Prabhupada himself, who taught by his very own example up until the leading days, to his death. How he was totally immersed. He didn't even care about his bodily disturbances. He was just totally immersed in translating the Bhaktivedanta purpose and giving us. And he was showing us how one should conquer death. Similarly, just a few months ago, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj, how totally fixed on the mission. In fact, if some of you to get a chance to listen to his last class that he gave, and his last class that he gave was, ironically, conquering the fear of death. And he was speaking from pastime of Srila Prabhupada and really reinforcing that very spirit in all of us, that we should be ready to welcome death at any time. And we do that by taking complete shelter of Shri Radha Gopinath, Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, and always be fixed in serving the devotees. So, as I was reflecting on this, my Guru Maharaj wrote a beautiful book called Many Moons, in which he wrote about the lives of nine devotees, who, again, lived that very principle of everything for Krishna and nothing for us. And in that there's this particular story of a very exalted Mataji called Mother Kirtida. And that story had such an impact on me because I'd read it when the book came out 10 years ago, and I was reading it last night. And I have a few minutes, so I'll just share her story. Mother Kirtida was based in Dallas, Texas. She was a disciple of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and she was from South Africa. And she had met the devotees quite late in her life. I believe if the records are accurate, she was about 48 years old when she met the devotees. And she'd been a selfless person all her life. She worked as a nurse, and she would work long hours every day. And she was going through such major health crisis at that time that basically, some cancerous substance in it. So she was literally, at the age of 48, she literally had nothing to, aspire for. She had, in her words, she had lived a life, she was a selfless soul. And she had learnt in her younger days, she had known about Krishna. So that piety in her, or that understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead was, at the forefront of her consciousness. So then she came, but she was so disgusted, she was just so frustrated with her life in general that she just wanted to give up her life because she was having health crisis, and at the same time she just didn't see any meaning in life left. So she came to the temple in Dallas, to the deities, gorgeous deities, personally installed by Srila Prabhupada, Shri Radha Kalachandji. She came in front of Radha Kalachandji, and she spoke her heart to Radha Kalachandji that I'm about to commit suicide. I know it's not the right thing to do, but please, give me this. And as she was speaking her mind to Radha Kalachandji, she had this vision of Radha Rani, or Radha, and Kalachandji, speaking to her back. Since you did not create life, you have no right to take your life. The deity spoke to her in that vision. And from there on, she just, she felt that instant reciprocation from Radha Kalachandji, and she felt she wanted to now dedicate her life in service to Radha Kalachandji and the devotees. And later on, she went and took initiation from Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And she became, she just sold everything and moved to Vrindavan. She was very attached to the Dham, and her health improved. And she started doing active service again. Again, she had a health crisis, but again, then she came out of it. So this was constantly going on, where she would have health crisis, come out of it, serve the devotees, serve, her Guru Maharaj, serve the Dham. And she was so enthusiastic that whoever came up to her, she would always encourage them to take shelter of Krishna, take shelter of Guru, take shelter of Prabhupada. She was so inspiring that she, just by that one devotee's presence in the whole yatra was just became more and more absorbed in service. And it came a time where her Guru Maharaj asked her to leave Vrindavan to come and serve him in England when he was doing his PhD. So, by her own example, even though she was so attached to the Dham, but she left it all to serve her Guru Maharaj, and that was, the principle was, one should be eager to serve our spiritual master, despite of, there may be at times in our own devotional life, we may be attached to a particular service, but the foremost service to the service to a spiritual master supersedes everything else. So she moved to the UK to look after her spiritual master, and then she again had another health crisis. And her Guru Maharaj told her, I think you're getting close to leaving your body, go back to Dallas, America, and leave your body in that community of devotees. And he asked all the devotees there to look after her. And it's beautifully described in the book. And there's a biography written of her. It's called Servant of Love. And towards the final days, devotees would come and do kirtan in her room. Devotees would take different shifts to do kirtan in her room. She would be constantly having visitors such as sannyasis, maharajas. The Maha from the deities would come to her room. And she became very mystical in her last final moments. She would say clearly, oh, Krishna and Balaram are here to take me. And she'd say, Radha Giridhari. I think she was seeing the deities of some devotees. And she was saying, oh, Radha Giridhari, so beautifully dressed today, and she could see the manjaris in the groves. So she was getting this mystical vision, and just by her purity, just by her surrender, all the devotees that were looking after her just felt so spiritually surcharged. And they felt that the whole community was united just to help her transition to the next stage. So, again, we read of these devotees, we meditate on these devotees, we seek their blessings for us to come to a higher platform of devotional service. And that's what Maharaj Parikshit is asking us to do through his own example. So, we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have Srila Prabhupada, we have Sri Radha Gopinath. We should take advantage of it. And when I say we, it's me, it's all of us, that we together make an effort to associate with these personalities so that our Bhakti Lata, the seed of devotional service in our hearts will just blossom, and that we become dear servants of Sri Radha Gopinath, Srila Prabhupada and the Vaishnavas. Okay? And one thing that I like to add, where Mataji was making a point, that when we read about these personalities, a lot of times it may see that they've set such a high bar, such a high standard. How do we come to it? And she made a very nice point. She said, make small changes to your life, but make them permanent. Small changes, make them permanent. And that will help us greatly for us to come closer to our goal. And she was saying how our whole life is actually a dialogue with Krishna. We are dependent on Krishna's grace. We should engage in active listening. Because we are associating with Krishna, we are associating with these personalities. Okay, thank you everyone. I think I have 1 minute if anyone has any question or comment. We shall end here. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki. Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki. Go Premanande.